Is there a God, or has man just invented him? The critic of religion Ludwig Feuerbach posed this question in 1841 in his work, The Essence of Christianity. In response, he developed his famous projection theory, which had a great influence on later critics of religion, such as Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Sigmund Freud. Ludwig Feuerbach is one of the most famous critics of religion. In his main work, The Essence of Christianity, he develops a fundamental critique of religion in which he criticizes the Christian religion, or more precisely, Christian theology and philosophy. Before studying philosophy, Feuerbach studied theology for a year. The theological knowledge he gained here was incorporated into his criticism of religion, as were the ideas of the Enlightenment, the ideas of his teacher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, and the work of Martin Luther. Feuerbach completed his doctorate in philosophy in 1828 and habilitated just a few months later. From 1829, he taught as a private lecturer at the University of Erlangen. In 1830, he anonymously publishes his religion-critical essay, Thoughts on Death and Immortality. Due to his critical attitude towards religion, Feuerbach was unable to continue his university career, and later wrote his philosophical writings as a private scholar on his wife's country estate, from whose income he lived. The Essence of Christianity was published in 1841 and made him instantly famous. The work caused fierce controversy. His so-called projection theory had a great influence on later critics of religion, above all Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Sigmund Freud. Feuerbach develops an anthropological philosophy that has its point of reference exclusively in this world. In his view, one should only start from man himself, not from a divine being or any absolute principle. He also adopts this anthropological perspective in relation to religion. In his view, religion is clearly of human origin, a construction of the human mind. Religion, therefore, does not focus on a higher being, but always on the human being. Accordingly, for Feuerbach, theology is not an independent science, but can be traced back to other sciences that also deal with man, such as psychology or anthropology. In his view, theology, the science of God, is anthropology, the science of man. Feuerbach predicts a natural decline in faith as science progresses. But why is human history always linked to a divine concept? Feuerbach explains God as a projection of man. The idea of God originated in the human mind. God is what people want him to be. God, therefore, only exists in the imagination of man as an idealized image of himself. The Bible states, God created man in his own image. Feuerbach turns the statement into its opposite and thus reverses the process of creation. It was not God who created man, but man who created his God. He writes, "What he, man himself, is not, but wishes to be, he imagines to be in his gods. The gods are the wishes of man conceived as real, transformed into real beings." Feuerbach sees the proof of this in the qualities that are attributed to God. They are all of a human nature. Wisdom, goodness, strength, justice, and love are human qualities. Feuerbach supports his assertion historically. The historical change in the images of gods and goddesses corresponds perfectly to the change in human culture and images of man. Accordingly, the later religions regard the earlier ones as idolatry or superstition. The idea of God, therefore, results from man himself. He makes his own being into that of God in an exaggerated way. Only the positive characteristics of man are transferred to God. Negative characteristics, on the other hand, are turned into their opposite. If man is finite, then God must be infinite. If man is imperfect, then God must be perfect. If man is temporal, then God must be eternal. If man is powerless, then God must be omnipotent. If man is sinful, then God must be holy. Feuerbach thus traces religiosity and the divine back to man alone. Religion is nothing more than a transcended projection of human desires and needs. The idea of a God and other religious ideas, such as miracles, eternal life, and immortal soul, are only the result of human wishful projections. Religion therefore arises because man perceives his own being as flawed and limited. In God, he can worship a being that is flawless and completely independent. Worship of God can therefore be interpreted on a psychological level as a human attempt to compensate for one's own weaknesses and deficits. The imperfect human being creates a perfect being as a counterpart. However, by projecting a part of himself onto a non-existent being, he alienates himself from himself. And what consequences should people draw from all this? For Feuerbach, religion is not an enemy that must be fought, but a dream from which people should wake up and a disease that must be cured. Man should see through the fact that the idea of God is merely a projection of his own idealized characteristics. Feuerbach's aim is to expose the idea of God as an illusion and demystify it. Man should recognize that everything supernatural has natural roots and that God is only a projection of human wishes and hopes. In this way, man can emancipate himself from religion. According to Feuerbach, religion is only a childhood stage of human self-awareness. The belief in the omnipotence of God, for example, expresses the human desire to control nature, the belief in a loving and caring God, the desire to live together in respect and solidarity. The emancipated person must recognize these desires as their own desires in order to be able to use them as a guide for their actions. According to Feuerbach, religion inevitably leads to indifference and passivity, hinders science, enlightenment, maturity, and freedom, promotes intolerance against non-believers, and shifts responsibility for life away from people. In Feuerbach's view, belief in God alienates people from themselves and prevents them from recognizing their true interests. Through emancipation from religion, man regains autonomy and control over this world. Then, he can also take power away from the political powers that base their power on God and assume political responsibility himself. Feuerbach thus represents a positive, very self-confident image of man. The real God of man is the human mind, for this has divine qualities, is immortal, and unlimited. Instead of being preoccupied with religious myths, people should rely on their intellect and search for the truth. In this way, they can recognize their true interests and become politically mature. The human being is therefore at the center of all thought and action. The most important task of man is to use his own mind. The most important task of the human community is to ensure the well-being of people. Feuerbach thus represents a radical humanism. He writes, "Homo homini deus est." Man is a god to man. According to Feuerbach, however, true humanism can only develop when the qualities formerly attributed to God once again become human ideals and goals of a humane way of life. Man is to become the highest being for man. He is to be transformed from a friend of God into a friend of man. For Feuerbach, the principle of morality is a love liberated from the belief in God, and the hereafter, a love for human and non-human nature. There are several points of criticism that can be leveled against Feuerbach's anthropological critique of religion. Here are the three most important. On the one hand, his concept of religion is quite one-sided. Feuerbach derives his concept of religion from Christianity, and therefore only criticizes Christian or other theistic religions. Experiential religions such as Buddhism remain untouched by his theory. Thus, Feuerbach does not really do justice to the differentiation and complexity of the phenomenon of religion. The Christianity that Feuerbach criticizes is also very one-sided and does not even encompass all aspects of the Christian image of God. The idea of a judging, angry, unjust God, as described in the Old Testament, cannot be explained by a projection of desirable characteristics. Moreover, existence as a projection does not exclude actual existence. Feuerbach cannot disprove that God actually exists beyond my wishes and illusions. The German philosopher Eduard von Hartmann summed up this criticism as follows: "It is true that something does not yet exist because it is wished for, but that does not mean that something cannot exist because it is wished for. If the gods are wishful beings, nothing follows from this for their existence or non-existence." To date, neither the existence nor the non-existence of a god has been proven. The memorial stone in Feuerbach's honor in Nuremberg bears two famous quotes from him: "Do good for the sake of man," and "Man created God in his own image." What do you personally think of Feuerbach's theory? Is God really just a projection of human desires? Feel free to write your opinion in the comments below.